Hi, welcome to Future Fast. And once again, we have Balagopal with us. And before we bring in him into the show, I hope you're enjoying. And for those of you who are here for the first time, uh, you've made a great start. Future Fast brings great conversations such as the one you're part of. But I sincerely urge you that this is the third part of our conversation with Balagopal, wherein we are going to talk about his perspective on future. So I really urge you that please catch up on the first two parts. The first part, particularly where we he shares his journey, which is just amazing, and you won't want to miss it. And second part is a whole lot of conversation about various aspects, starting from factory and union and the relevance of union to today and how it was, and also on the banking. So you don't want to miss that. So please do go and catch up on that. And we will jump straight in. And if you're not subscribed to Future Fast yet, please do it now. And Bala, once again, thank you so much for making time to be here with us. Welcome to Future Fast. So
it's good to be back, Danju.
So, Bala, what are the things you foresee as the biggest changes that are likely to happen in the future? I mean, I'm just starting straight from there. So.
Yeah. At a time when there is so much uncertainty and so much unpredictability and so much asymmetry happening around us, forecasting and prediction is a hazardous thing. But it is very interesting also because it helps us to look at contemporary developments and try and see where these will lead to, because what is happening today, in fact, what happened yesterday has influenced what happened today. What is happening today is going to influence what's happening tomorrow. I don't think we are sufficiently conscious of that. We are sometimes too much in the present, which also may not be an entirely good thing, because our actions today have consequences which will be felt tomorrow, and often not even in a proximate way, but maybe felt somewhere very far away. So we are all responsible for these actions. So it's good to think about the future. So with that brief forward, this is a combination of, I think, you may actually feel that, am I saying what I want to happen, or am I talking about what I think will happen? I think it's a combination of both. So, so I'm trying to be as objective as possible in this. The pandemic, when the whole world economy hit the pause button for more than a year, actually, I think made us look at many of the things which we were doing, and which we were doing probably unself-consciously, and often even without thinking. And we were thinking this is the normal way, this is how things happen, etc. And though we know in history things change, we think things will change in the long term. I think the pandemic and the shutdowns and the lockdowns and as I said, the economy hit the pause button. Everything just stopped. So that made us look at various things. And then we realized that actually many things had happened which at one level were being celebrated as miracles of modern life, like a supply chain, if I go to the supermarket in any city in India, the apples are from Australia and the grapes are from somewhere else. And so we used to read about the developed economies and all this being so when, 20 years ago, when India was still sort of, say, not yet that much of a consumerist society, we used to read about all these being the miracles of living in Singapore and in the United States and in Western Europe, where so the seasonality, life has seasons. There are things which grow and then they stop growing, and then you have to grow something else. And now man seem to be able to rise above all the limits of imposed by nature, and you can have out of season fruits anywhere because it will be in season somewhere in the world. So the supply chains extended from as far away as New Zealand and Argentina and Canada and all that to places like India. And so these long supply chains, we went about it not thinking about in a sense, these are irrational. These are, these are very strange way of arranging economic life, that one should get one's food articles from halfway across the world.
Thousands of kilometers away.
Exactly. And the justification for all this was supposed to be price. In other words, the cost of doing this was seen to be optimal. So this was like carrying Adam Smith's pin making example, division of labor, etc., carrying it to an absurd limit. And so we ended up here buying our apples from New Zealand instead of buying it, say, from closer here, say, which is itself very far away, like Himachal.
Thomas Friedman's world is flat.
Yeah,
justifying it.
Exactly, Thomas Friedman's. So here the thing is, so we got into this idea that we are not really, like somebody said, geography is history. So, it no longer mattered where you are. You can eat what you want, when you want, etc. Because now you are no longer bound by the laws of nature, the laws of the weather, the laws of climate, and all that. You are above all that. I think the pandemic and the shutdown taught us that is extremely fragile. This long supply chains are not resilient. They're very brittle, and they can snap at the slightest one finger can tip these just-in-time supply chains have no slack, and as a result, they can just snap. And they snapped all over the world. They snapped with very, very bad consequences for people across the world. So my predictions are the following. We are going to rediscover local supply chains, local community, local production. And in fact, in a state like Kerala, for instance, which gets many of its food items itself from very far away, because Kerala agriculture turned more to commercial crops and export crops. And so the food articles, which all used to be grown here itself, every community grew whatever it needed. It became dependent on trade. So now we are going to discover, and as the world discovered also, in fact, during the pandemic, when everything shut down, many people discovered community, discovered local supply chains, discovered local networks. So first thing is hyper-local, and in fact hyper-local supply chains are going to be found to be not only resilient, but they're going to be found to be efficient. They're going to provide livelihoods to a wide range of people. And, we will be really understanding what E.F. Schumacher meant when he wrote "Small is Beautiful." Why he said that is a philosophical, that's a way of life which is very natural for man. It doesn't mean returning to some primitive state. It means doing all what you want to do, but within local supply chains. So that's
so the first. If I just rephrase it, what became a compulsion because of COVID, you say will become a permanent feature.
Exactly, because we had.
But don't you see a lot of people already reverting to all those fancy?
It's happening. See,
but you think it will sustain this?
I think so, because I think what has happened is many communities have discovered. There are various aspects of local production. In Kerala, for instance, almost our entire supply of vegetables and groceries and all that comes from Tamil Nadu. And Tamil Nadu's agriculture is, in fact, is so dependent on buying from Kerala that it will collapse if the buying from Kerala stops. Examination of GST data shows the interstate transfers between Tamil Nadu and Kerala there is a flow of about 1 lakh crores, a net flow of 1 lakh crores every year from Kerala to Tamil Nadu. And most of it is for buying various things which Tamil Nadu supplies. And a good part of that is agricultural produce. So what I'm saying is the interdependence.
Bangalore is significantly dependent on Tamil Nadu for vegetables.
Exactly, in the same way. So now these, during the pandemic, when the transportation, everything came to a halt, the government of Kerala promoted, as an emergency measure, it promoted backyard gardens, terrace gardens, using grow bags and all. And everybody thought, okay, this is just like tinkering, it is like rainwater harvesting. Everybody talks about it, nothing really happens and all. But that was not true. In the first quarter after this policy of, homestead gardens and to grow vegetables, when encouragement of that was announced by the government of Kerala, the net addition to of vegetable arrivals after one quarter was 500 tons a month. And after one more quarter, it had doubled to 1,000 tons a month. And then again, it had doubled. So more and more and more, here the whole thing is, if you can imagine 1 lakh homesteads, each growing 1 kilo of tomatoes, you are talking about something like 100 tons of tomatoes coming from with hardly any investment in anything. So on the other hand, if you want to produce 100 tons of tomatoes from one big or several big farms, you will have to put in a lot of significant investment. So this happened just like that. And in the same way, all the other vegetables. So I think first thing is you're going to find this. Related to this, you're going to find, see, the thing which happened after the Industrial Revolution until today is integration of manufacturing was what happened. All various stages in a manufacturing process were integrated under one roof, and that became known as a factory. And the factories grew, and as more and more they became more and more complex, the factories became bigger and bigger and more integrated. So the whole thrust of industrial progress was towards integrating more. Now what has happened is, thanks to digital technology and various other technologies like additive manufacturing, which is 3D printing and various other things, we can go in the reverse direction. You can disintegrate manufacturing processes so that what was previously done under one roof can be done under many, many roofs, and without any loss of efficiency, without any loss of quality.
Well, incidentally, Germany got started something called island manufacturing just few years before COVID, and their intention was primarily to reduce the dependency on China. And this island manufacturing was primarily to cater to the near users. So they manufacture there and cater to the customers around that community.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, post-COVID, that has become a bigger necessity.
Yeah, it's become bigger.
But this was started off to counter the China dependence.
Yeah, so see,
in fact, we started doing it in India as well now.
For geopolitical reasons, strategic reasons, and for pure technological reasons, you can end up doing the same thing. But I believe this, this local manufacturing and customization, what they call mass customization, things like that, the time has come now because the technologies are now available. Additive manufacturing was a very kind of futuristic concept about 20 years ago. Today, it's now happening. People are even making 3D printing houses and, things like that. So big machines, complex machines. So the second thing which I think we are going to find is a huge increase in disintegration of manufacturing processes, leading to dispersal of manufacturing operations across communities, which will lead to less stress on land, less stress on communities, less stress on logistics, less stress on transportation. So instead of, if you want to support one Foxconn factory employing 10,000 people, and if you want to support 100 factories employing 100 people each, which is the same amount, and producing the same output, the logistical challenge in terms of complexity of logistics and the length of the supply chains, etc., will be much less in the case of supporting a dispersed manufacturing.
And local MSMEs can be better sustained.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, all the costs of manufacture will also come down because people will be staying in their homes. They will be just walking across to their, it's like work near home.
Actually, I've been advocating this, calling it distributed economy model for last 6-7 years here.
Yeah, I think
but
the time
it's
has
taking
come,
off now.
Yeah, I believe we will see it taking off. Then the related and another thing is going to be, I think, we are going to come a full circle from Karl Marx's alienation of labor and the product of labor, which Karl Marx saw as actually the biggest problem of capitalism was he didn't think it was an evil system or anything. He thought it was a very productive system, capitalism, and one phase in the evolution of man and society and the means of production and their production relations, etc. But one of the damaging consequences of this was the worker became alienated from the product of his work. So now I think we are going to find a reversal of that going to happen. This alienation will start decreasing because worker will be more closely connected with his or her output. There will be more autonomy. What we call gig work today, which we are worried about, we will realize is actually a good thing because you work according to your own time and your own schedule. Of course, a lot of our way of thinking and all that will have, there's much more freedom. And in my opinion, all this will enable much more democracy in the way we live. Democracy is, democracy as a parliament, something which happens inside a parliament or a legislature, is a travesty of the concept, in my opinion. Democracy is supposed to happen everywhere, in our homes, in our place of work, in the street, in the local community, in the parish, in the in the county councils and in the panchayats and everywhere. So I think we are going to find that. So in my opinion, these are some of the major changes which are going to happen. And that will influence even the way business is organized, the way the state is organized, the way governance is organized, the way administration is organized. Everything will have to change to accommodate this new reality, which is where artificial intelligence, or instead of dehumanizing everything, will become enablers, in my opinion. Even the blockchain will promote decentralization and delegation, and all that will be decentralized and will be enabled by these new technologies. So we need not be afraid of technologies. I think we should look at these technologies enable us to do things today which we could not do 50 years ago.
So true. In fact, even I'm forgetting that 5Ps, the management guru who came up with 5Ps, right? The American professor in Harvard. He, along with a co-author, wrote a book called Stakeholder Economy. It is actually very similar to what I used to call as distributed economy. In fact, no, I try to pitch it with a tokenization, and I see a bigger opportunity coming up there. But one thing is that the necessity is that large companies have to start thinking like this. But how do you see, what would you give out as a message to the board of large corporations from a point of, because see, they've always tried to see, even now, very recently, Ola set up what they call a gigafactory. I thought it was so stupid. Right? I mean, in these times, they are setting up a gigafactory. What Ford did exactly 100 years ago.
Exactly. So I believe, see, what they're only seeing one side of the technology, one aspect of the technology, which is the application of AI and robotics, particularly robotics. So they feel
the same can still be done with 100 factories across India, right?
Which is the whole problem. They are not there. Their vision is, in my opinion, this dystopian vision of large factories working 24/7 without a single human being inside. That seems to be to use a very crude term, seems to be the wet dream of many of these capitalists. That is, they think that is the apotheosis of business. The Valhalla of business is huge factories without workers. I mean, which is a perversion of the whole idea about man and society, etc. Man is a social animal. We realize our humanity. We are able to develop our humanity, and the only way we can transcend our humanity is through our social nature. And when we start having dystopian visions of factories without workers, work into the night, all dark, silent, dark factories, but with everything clicking, because machines don't need any light to see what they're doing and all that. So that seems to be this kind of dream.
One of my guests who we were talking about, and they were suggesting, in fact, I think it was a transhumanist who was talking about that, machines will be building products and humans will no longer be working in factories. And when I asked a similar question, I was saying, but see, why should humans be working? They should be traveling, doing what they like, playing instruments or learning music or traveling, even space traveling and all that, so the logic seems right, though.
Yeah. No, it's right. But, that will beg a lot of other questions. Like, in fact, even the numbers on the planet of human beings, which is 7.5 billion and still increasing, was largely a product of the way we organize society. It was not a natural, normal development.
Interestingly, we crossed 8 billion. One of the guests said that we will stop at 8. We will not get to 9 and 10, though that is what is linearly projected, that we will keep growing. But he said that that was his prediction as well, that I say that humanity will cap at 8.
No, what will happen? That I don't agree with that. I think what will happen is it will keep growing, but then it will start shrinking. Like China, population today is 1.4 billion. It's expected to, by the end of the 21st century, come down to 800 million. So it's going to come down. So the point is, it will keep increasing up to a point as long as the fertility rates in some countries continue to remain what they are. But there, everything is flattening out. Even Africa, even in the most backward countries.
India is actually reducing.
Yeah. India is already almost reaching the replacement rate now. It's 2.2. The total fertility rate is 2.2. So my point is, it's a very, so we are only a short way, but within the country, there are huge differences. Like in Kerala,
in the urban area, we have dropped to 1.7.
Yeah, Kerala is already below, around 1.7, but Bihar and all that are still closer to 3 or even higher. So there is a lot of asymmetry within countries, within regions, within states. But overall, in the aggregate, yes, population will stabilize around. But to just come back to this, therefore, what I see is that the way economic activities, the way livelihoods, the way humans living together in communities will see themselves and their needs and their requirements is going to undergo a change. And businesses will have to start adapting to that. Some businesses have already started realizing that this kind of decentralization and dispersal of economic activity is beginning to happen. And I think slowly we will start seeing. So, for example, one thing which I foresee is that the big malls and the big hyper stores and all that, I think they're going to be past their use by date very soon. And we are going to return to the community, the local grocer and the local shopkeeper, etc. But the whole thing will be reorganized. These big malls and all will become like Amazons. They will become platforms which will be providing initially will provide supplies to local outlets. Then very soon people will realize, why should I buy the onion which is made, say, in some province in China? Why not I buy the onion made, in the next panchayat? There are some farmers there who can grow onions. Why not buy it from there? Unless there is some compelling climatic and soil reason. And there also we must understand that science and technology are developing to such an extent that soil-less cultivation in controlled environments under factory conditions, all that is happening. So a small, vertically integrated, say, 2-storied building can replace a 10-acre farm for in terms of the output of fresh vegetables and all. And even these will be ripening and growing and flowering even at night, because they will be lit by LED lights which are of the correct luminosity, which can mimic sunlight and things like that. So I think what we're going to find is that the technologies now which is available for localization is going to be used by communities to enable localization. And that's going to happen.
Some time back we did we do that every year from Waste Impact. We do hackathons and generating ideas and leading to creating companies. One of the things we had done some time back was on the food waste. And around that time, we were talking to some people, and one of the things which came about is that nearly 2 billion of world population eat outside. They don't have a kitchen inside the house. The data that I came across. One of the commentaries around that was that this is only going to increase. That we will have less and less kitchen at home, and more people are going to eat from outside. So this was just before COVID, and then of course COVID happened, and I think everybody were forced into their kitchen. But what's your take on that? How do you see that? In fact, Southeast Asia is one of the biggest. Nearly 1 billion people who don't eat at home, as in no kitchen at home, comes from Southeast Asia.
No, so I mean, say for example, I think this is going to be not only in our our finding where to get the resources for our food intake. This is going to also influence everything we do, including our transportation needs. See, today, for example, personalized transport. There are two paradigms in the world which generally govern transportation. One is personalized transportation, and the other is public mass transportation. Now, so these are seen as also some places they're seen as being complementary. Some places they're seen as being opposition to each other. And there are people who say that if you have a sufficiently well-developed mass transportation system, then in certain kind of urban habitations can evolve, like Manhattan and the downtowns of many of the big cities of the world, where it doesn't make sense owning a car because parking space is so scarce and so difficult to find and so expensive that it makes more sense to leave the car at home and go. So the way I look at it is, I think a lot of this discourse about EVs, electric vehicles, is missing the point because they seem to be thinking now internal combustion engines are going to be replaced by EVs. And EVs will be working on batteries, and they don't, at an independent vehicular level, the emission is significantly less than in the case of IC vehicles, etc. Now, I'm not getting into the whole debate about where is the electricity going to come from. It has to come from somewhere, from some grid sources to enable the charging of EVs, but I'm not getting into that. Where we are missing the point is, we are missing the point that EVs are going to also come along with other technologies like autonomous vehicles, and autonomous, not individual transportation vehicles alone. But so the whole notion of this transportation system as viewed from a system perspective is going to change. We can imagine, that it's like a hop on, hop off kind of things. If I want to go, I just step out of my house and stand on the road, and some small unit will come by, driverless vehicle. I get into that and come back. So this whole notion that I have to have a garage, it will appear antediluvian within a very short time, because it makes no sense.
I actually am completely with you. In fact, almost 10 years ago, I was in some place. I was telling them that 25 years from now, we will not be driving a car. Yeah. And none of us will be owning a car. In fact, only few, those who want to drive, will have to go to an arena like today's equestrian, wear a gear, drive around, come out, and then get into some place. And world will be zero accident because we will not be driving it.
Exactly. So, I mean, if we just look at some numbers, I think this whole thing about personal transportation as a value system is a very American notion, which has come to us about vast open spaces. You get into a car and you just drive off, and there's a mythology which has come up around it, or literature and music and everything. But I think my freedom is not constrained to any, even when I get on to a car and get out onto the road, I cannot drive how I feel like. I still have to follow rules. I still have to I can go only where the road goes. I cannot go off the road and just drive onto a mountain in a fancy car. I can't do that. So we tend to forget that this freedom, in any case, this exaggerated notion of personal liberty and individuality, etc., there are always constraints, because I think we keep forgetting that actually this exaggerated view of personal liberty is in conflict with our social nature as a social animal, because we exist and we derive our strength and our capacity to lead good, happy lives because of our social nature, not in spite of it. And so this Ayn Randish, this Atlas Shrugged kind of dystopian notion of this lone individual who is defying the whole world and will go off onto a mountain fastness, in my opinion, it's a fable. It's a fable. It's a fantasy, and which doesn't really reflect, which goes against this fundamentally social nature of human beings. And the reason why this otherwise unimpressive ape has dominated the planet is only because of the social nature. The fact that they could work together, and it's been brought out very well by people like Yuval Noah Harari and all that, who bring out the social nature. The most powerful tool used by man as part of his social nature is the capacity to tell stories. And that is how he is able to reach beyond the place where his voice can reach. Say, for instance, if I shout, I can be heard 50 yards away. But charismatic figure wandering around in the desert in Arabia has influenced 1 billion people to follow him today. So my point is, that's the power of storytelling. And, so how these things get across and transcend distances and transcend time, etc., is the power of storytelling. So which stems from our social nature. That's my point, which I'm trying to say. So I think, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think businesses and organizations and government also, government and governance. See, even the nation state is only about 150 years old. It grew up in what is today Germany and etc. in the second half of the 19th century. The whole notion of nation state came then. It was built on three fundamental pillars, which was a common language, common religion, and a common enemy. Now, the point is, so it is built on very, very flimsy foundations, and it is not something, when we think of Ashoka's empire, that defied every definition, or the Qin empire, they had nothing to do with those were civilizational entities which had nothing to do with the nation state. So I think even notions of polity, how society, how we should be organized, the whole notion of countries, etc., may be questioned, interrogated in ways which may lead to them having to change, or work out other ways of coming together. Because all what we see is less than 100 years old. All the constitutions which have been written are less than 100, 150, 200 years old maximum. So everything changes, and if government and governance and everything is going to change, definitely business will also have to change.
Interesting. I'll come back. I just want to pull you back to one conversation, what you're referring to earlier about our social abilities, what is at the core. But how do you see the digital media? People are telling nice stories. They actually make up. I know some people personally who are fairly antisocial in person, as in they don't interact with people at all, but they are extremely social on their apps. They are making videos, conversations, but when you meet in person, they are so close, cold, and so close.
No, I think that's a perfectly understandable, Nanju, in a sense. See, it is like, and that is I think one of the enabling things which technology can do. It can make somebody break out of their personality, the walls of erected by their personal personality predilections, and they can behave in ways which they are now free to behave. They feel
somewhere it encourages the cancel culture, right? I mean, if
does.
you are not very positive for me, I can just block you out, and I can.
No, and that, I mean, see, that again is so. I think what we have this cancel culture also has happened because that's the easiest response. You can just ghost a person. You just don't respond. You just cancel. You put
just block them out.
So I think what will happen is then, as a society itself, we will come up with, especially in our local community. Say, I'm not a hermit who locks myself up in a room 24/7. I will have to eventually come out somewhere. The thing about such thing will be that they will be questioned by people who they run into in the local pub or the local tea shop or the local adda or the local restaurant or diner, when somebody will say, look, what's wrong with you? People are saying that you're just, ghosting people. Then that guy will be challenged there. So I'm saying that behavior will run up against questions by neighbors, by associates, by colleagues and all that. And that itself will be a check. Today, we are still in my opinion, in a transitory phase where people can get away with this, because the person I'm canceling is, say, somebody in the US who's now feeling completely bewildered because my phone calls are blocked, my WhatsApp messages are blocked, everything is blocked. So I don't know how to get through. And many of us face it, from a son or a daughter who does not wish to talk to the parent, and if they're, you can just cancel that person. So, and there is no way to get through to that person. We don't know anybody in that town where the person is living to say, can you just go and find out? Don't disturb them. Don't bother them. But are they okay? We just want to know whether they are okay. So I'm saying there will be solutions will be found, especially when these local communities start becoming stronger, and of course you can plug in and plug out. You don't, when I say local community, it's not necessarily the community into which I was born. It will be the community into which I am plugged in at that time. Sure. So if I am in Coorg and I'm say I bought a small coffee estate or something there, and I might be from Kerala, but I am now plugged into that local network, that local supply chain, and that local community. And I obviously am staying there because I'm deriving some value from that. And there, so I think community is going to become something which is going to get an importance which it deserved, which it probably had some time back, but which vanished with technology enabling us to reach out to great distances and all that. So we tended to ignore and neglect the importance of the local community in which we are embedded.
How do you see this sense of identity in this? Because see, that is one of the very strong things, right? At the same time, the language, the place, or even the community.
Yeah. So I think we are going to, in a sense, I think it's going to be a very good development, but there is going to be a transition phase when it will be troublesome.
So when you say good, what do you mean good?
By good, what I mean is, for example, there was a time, say for instance, I worked in Manipur for a brief while, and I still have got connections with Manipur. My wife and we go to Manipur every year because we are helping some social entrepreneurs there by funding some of the projects in village education, village schools, and village livelihoods around. Now, one of the things which was very interesting about Manipur is, in the hill areas, the villages are spaced about 1 day's march apart, which means about 10 miles apart, 10 kilometers apart, in very, very difficult to traverse hilly areas, which have got deep valleys, where fast-flowing rivers are there, and then you have these parallel mountain hill ranges, etc. And the villages are perched normally on the crest. Now, what is interesting is, when we today hear about identities like Naga, Kuki, Meitei, Mizo, etc., but even those are not very meaningful identities if you go down. You have to zoom in more. There are more than 20 to 25 major Naga tribes like Zeli, Rongmai, then Tangkhul, Angami, etc. So when you say Naga, it is like saying Indian. In the sense that for them it is as meaningless, because there are sub-Naga identities. And what is interesting is, all of them don't speak Nagami. Nagami is something like a lingua franca, but every village, every tribe have their own dialect. Every village has its own dialect. So my point here is, that is, in my opinion, actually a fine example of how community can become such a defining influence on the members of that community, that they even have their own code of, not only code of conduct, that their own code of behavior, but their own communication medium through their own dialect also. So if that happens, in my opinion, then what happens is, the identity then becomes that of the village. That is the identity, that community. There are 100 houses. That is the community. The larger community is only a sort of, it's almost like a political entity. It is not something which will be very emotional about, but it will be something for which I will say, come together to cast my vote and all that. But it's not going to really stir me up, because if you ask me, where do I belong? I belong to that village community where we speak that particular language, where we have our own legends and our own stories on. So in my opinion, a move towards community will complete the circle actually. We are many thousand years ago, we moved from hunter-gatherer to nomadic, from there to partly settled. Then agriculture was the major technology which came in and completely changed the human nature, and because made us settle, we had to stay somewhere. The moment we stayed somewhere and started planting crops, we had to wait for the crop to be harvested, etc. Then, so to enable all that to happen, you needed property rights and all that. Then somebody has to lay down the law, somebody has to enforce the law, somebody has to adjudicate. So we had legal systems, etc. come up. So it's very interesting how economic causes have actually been the drivers of a lot of things which we think are, some things which are handed down on a mountain in a flash of thunder and lightning and all. Those things actually, those codes of conduct and behavior were made necessary because of the economic activity and the form of economic activity. The next major change after the agricultural revolution was the industrial revolution. So which happened just 200 years ago. And now what we are seeing is, the speed of change is probably accelerated because the digital revolution which has happened has made things possible, which will, in my opinion, can start reversing all what has happened since the agricultural revolution. All this integration of communities coming into the bringing together of people into a larger entity than the tribe or family, which is a nation or a civilization or a state. The notion of state, etc. All that was enabled by these integrating forces. So these were centripetal kind of forces. Now you have centrifugal forces at work, which are fueled by the technologies which have now become available, which enable dispersal again. And there's no real need to have a glue which brings everybody together. So I mean, that's the way I like to think. So identity, in my opinion, is going to become much more distant, much more fractured into very, very, very small slices that it will become almost meaningless. It will be like family.
I think perhaps, but that's a very macroscopic view because, if you our human lifespan, if you look at it as 150,000 or 150,000 years, then we're talking about the whole evolution in it's time scale shrinking. Problem is today as we live, I come from a community which is some say is less than 1 lakh people in the world. Right? So there is a lot of debate about how do we sustain it, and there is also a lot of conversations about that in 100 years from now, this community will not exist. So in that context, so there is a lot of identity conversations happen. And of course, there is politics also happening. People want independent statehood. But point is that we are an absolute majority, even in the district, which is identified with our community. So it's a very, very funny situation there.
So when you really think about it, therefore, in my opinion, see, every one of us, the problem is each one of us, even say you as a person from Coorg, you have multiple identities. The point is, which identity do we assume is going to be the dominant identity as far as an individual is concerned? Say today, I am, say, a Malayali because that's my mother tongue. I am say a businessman, so that's a form of an identity. I'm a member of a local club, that's another identity. I am I'm an English speaking thing, so I belong to another minority group within the country, which has had the disadvantage of an English education. So there are so many identities that finally, as like what's happening in Manipur, there's a moot point about which identity is going to really dominate. And while being a Malayali, I might say I'm also a Hindu. But then the Malayalis are also Christian, and Malayalis are also Muslim, and Malayalis are of various Jains and other religious persuasions. So, and within each, in Hindu, in Karnataka, you have the Shaivite and the Vaishnavite and so many other things. So I think identity is going to get interrogated, and it will become more and more difficult to sustain as a basis for dividing or uniting people, because it will be always a shifting kind of thing.
The at one end, the global economy and right, and at the same time, this Western global economy also brought highly individualistic approach. It's a beautiful contradiction, right? Yeah. It's world is flat, but again, individually superior.
Yeah, exactly. No, so, I mean, and I agree with that.
And the same thing is actually coming to India, I feel. I mean, today people, I think it's the highest level of voicing of identity. And so much so, I mean, that's interesting. I don't know if you want to touch upon a bit of politics in this sense. Do you think in future India will be called India or Bharat?
Well, I tend to think each one of these things are devoid of merit. In my opinion, these are all opportunistic things which are used by clever politicians to improve their allure and their appeal to their particular constituency whom they are addressing. Because these notions, say renaming a country or renaming a language or renaming a state or a district or reinterpreting history of a country to project a particular the interests of a particular section of the people who inhabit geography, etc. These are all political ploys, because that's what politics is all about. Politics is all about articulating and furthering competing interests in a society. That's what after politics is. So they will use various means for that. So, I mean, today we think, see, the West is supposed to be highly, the West has this linear notion of economic development, and what they're implying is where they are now, we will all get there sometime if we are lucky and if we do our work and if we are obedient and all, we will get there. I don't think so at all. I think it's a let 1,000 flowers bloom. There are so many different pathways to social and economic development. So my point here is that I think that you take a developed country like the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, the tribal animosity there, you will not find even in Manipur. The bitterness and hostility and sheer hatred of the Catholics for the Protestants is unbelievably deep-rooted there. And it's only some wannabe Indian PIO who wants to get a UK citizenship and all, who are able to overlook that, because the Northern Irelanders are not willing to overlook that. For them, it is a very important fact of life. It defines their identity, defines them as people itself. So in a country which is one of the most prosperous countries in the world, which for 200 years, you said, dominated an empire on which the sun never set, if their tribal loyalties are so bitter that they have no hesitation in burning down the school just because it is a school of the competing or the opposing denomination of the same religion. That is the irony of it. The same religion. So, like in India, our big problem here is, in my opinion, not so much communal as defined by religion, but it is caste-based. The caste-based the kind of vertical slicing and horizontal slicing which has happened in this society has never happened anywhere else in the world. There are no analogs really to this. To such an extent that today I am told that people who are doing clinical trials of modern genetically developed, using gene technologies, new molecules and new drugs which are being developed, if they want to test it out on particular phenotypes, the country in the world where you can find almost undisturbed gene pools are within the 3,000, 4,000 jatis of India, because of the strict rules of consanguinity and etc., which have been followed without without a single violation for generations. The gene pools within each of these jatis is quite distinct from though broadly the genes that we share are similar and have come from Africa and come from Central Asia and all that. But so here also there are some crazy people who talk about racial purity and Aryan purity and all this nonsense. Yeah. But I think the fact of the matter is that we have other identity issues here in India which are deep-seated and which have which are inherited and which are transmitted by birth and things like that, like caste, which is a very serious identity problem here in India.
Well, interestingly, I just came across a book about caste system in Germany. I'm yet to read it, but I'll share that across.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So, who do you think are the impacting the kind of future, and what kind of people do you think will drive this change? I'm a little biased towards entrepreneurs, though.
No, I think the people who are really driving change are not the entrepreneurs, in my opinion. I don't think it is Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and all. I think those guys are interesting guys who produced interesting companies, and that's where the impact is going to be, and that's it. The people who are going to impact are the people who are coming up with ideas. Like I just mentioned, Yuval Noah Harari and people like that. See, he has, let's put it this way. What has he done? He has connected the dots in a particular way and told a story. And he's now, for instance, the future which he is presenting, the future view he is presenting, is a view which he's saying that, and he's made a lot, all the readers, all those people who read him, think, and some of them are worried and some of them are exhilarated. And what is it? He says that the future he sees is going to be a world run by algorithms. So he says, it is not as if robots are going to run anything, but robots are going to do tasks. Because, to answer the other question about this view about factories where nobody is working, somebody has to make the machine that makes the machine that makes the machine that makes the product. So finally, it all comes down to some, people by hand have to make something somewhere. Somebody has to design it out. Somebody has to make the prototype, try it out. So ultimately, it comes down to that. So the whole journey of the Industrial Revolution was using machines to make products. So in a nutshell, now we have coming to the limits of that. But this algorithm, where the algorithm is superior to the human mind, can do things faster than the human mind, can do things better. For example, Harari, in one of his podcasts, he says about, if you are even the girl you should date, or the guy a girl should date, whatever it is there will be a much more sensible choice made by an algorithm, because it will consider you. It is not abstractly finding a solution. I mean, finding the partner. It is finding a correct choice for Balagopal. And Balagopal, as defined by all his actions, all his statements, all his purchases, every single shred of any action which has come out into the public domain, which expresses what I actually think, even unexpressed thoughts of mine. So what I'm trying to say is, a guy like Harari, if you look in the past also, it was just half a dozen people's ideas and stories that they told which conquered humanity. For the last 2,000, 3,000 years, that's been the case. So today also I find that there are people like Harari, and then you take Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins, and the people who oppose them. Like there are people who, this born again, the new church in America, which can fill, the preachers can fill stadiums. They're in fact purchasing stadiums from football teams and all that, because those are their churches. There are 50,000 people and all who show up for these community gatherings of theirs on. So I think it is these big storytellers who are, and they're going to replace the politician. The demagogues are now these guys, these storytellers, and not the Hitlers and the Lenins and the Stalins and the Gandhis and all that of the past century. The 21st century, we are going to see people with maybe inconspicuous looking guy like Yuval Noah Harari. He looks a professorial looking guy. But because of social media and because of the enormous reach which he can get, he is able to power the thoughts of people who will never see him, who will never know what kind of guy he is. Many people will not even know that he is an Israeli and that he is a Jew. But they will follow what he's saying and they will be very much influenced by what he's saying. So I think we're going to find a lot of people coming up like that.
Interesting. So what would you want to advise those who want to get into policy making or even be an entrepreneur or into research? Because these are the areas you also touched.
Okay.
So how would you advise them to prepare for this future that you just spoke about?
So the first thing which I'll advise them to do is I'll tell them, see, things are changing. So in other words, the more of whatever we did in the past, etc., is not going to work. We have to think differently. So even industry is going to be different. Economic activity is going to be different. Supply chains are going to be different. And the algorithms are going to be taking over. And there will be a platformization of a lot more economic activity. And I don't see that as a bad thing, because that will enable, say, a small grower who previously was growing only sub-market lot sizes of produce, where previously he could not go to a market and he was at a disadvantage. Now he just goes onto a platform and he can see whether the price is okay, he'll sell. If it is not okay. So I'm saying actually a platform in many ways is also very empowering. You know, it has its downsides. And
True.
I think we will see probably a lot more regulation coming up. Even our legal luminaries and legal brains have not really started thinking of what are the implications of platformization in terms of common law and commercial law and civil law and the law of contracts and all that. Like Uberization, for instance, threw up, like you said in our previous conversation, Uber threw up a lot of questions which the business community and the legal community and governments were not ready for. But they will very soon find answers to that. So I think the leadership, whether they are entrepreneurs, whether they are politicians, whether they are administrators or managers, they will have to get ready to and get their heads around, wrap their heads around ideas like platformization, algorithmic decision making, dispersed manufacturing,
Distributed.
All these things which give a lot more autonomy. So we are going to move in the opposite. Actually, the world is already beginning to move in the opposite direction, but we are still propelled by a momentum. We are still going in the wrong direction because we are still impelled by integration, nation state, get everybody together into one big cohort called the nation or the company or the factory and things like that. So I think the whole idea is we need a new kind of literacy, which will have to be people who can understand this. And therefore, what's going to become very important is the leaders themselves may not possess the capacity to fully understand all the implications. So role of people like Yuval Noah Harari and others, they will be not just writers and thinkers and sitting inside classrooms. They will become like the new prophets. They will be the ones whom people will, they will be the rock stars who will be able to fill a stadium, because you want to hear this. You want to hear. I mean, that was the same reason why people went to hear Jesus of Nazareth talk or Muhammad talk sometime back, or Gautam Buddha give a sermon in a village. Why people, by word of mouth, everything spread, and why they went there was somebody saying something which people felt is going to affect their lives, is going to change their lives. And the new prophets are going to be guys like this.
Well, you actually already started the conversation with your predictions. So I just want to ask you a few things from borrowing from the conversations I've had in Future Fast with some of our past guests. So we've had people who believe they're working on aging. They say curing aging.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, for the audience and listeners, if you have not had, there's a couple of very interesting conversations with Dr. William, and there's one other with Aubrey Degre, who are some of the authorities in the aging space. So please do watch or listen to them. So they talk about aging can be cured, and it will happen in our own lifetime, and death will become an option. Uh, what's your take? I mean, if that's an option, would you take it?
No, let me put it this way. I think, I think when they say that aging problem will be solved, I don't think we are talking about somebody whom we, this present human form, somebody who will be 200 years old. I don't think we are talking about that.
Oh, no. That is exactly what they're talking about.
No,
In
so
fact,
I don't agree. I don't agree
okay,
with that. I'll
okay.
tell you why. Because what I feel is, see, it's like somebody said, the ship of Theseus. That famous in the myth, the
Yes.
Theseus started out on a ship, and it was constantly getting battered and repaired and all that. So as they were sailing, they will replace this plank with another plank, this thing. And finally, Theseus one day said, "This is not the ship we started out with. This is completely different ship." So in the sense that we will all then become like a ship of Theseus. The tooth,
Oh,
the
well,
teeth
there
will
are
repeat, eyes will
there are
repeat.
two schools running here. There's one school which talks about the technology will keep improving, that we can generate a nailing body part, the Theseus ship, what you talked about. And that is one school. There is another school who's actually Dr. Williams' conversation. In fact, he is talking about extending or stopping or working on a component which essentially makes us age. So it basically keeps shortening. I am forgetting the term. So because of which we age, and he's looking at addressing that part. And even if you just stop shortening, so you actually keep your thing. So you organically heal and extend your.
I get it.
So there are different schools of thought.
I know. So my response to that is, see, I don't have the scientific knowledge or anything to respond specifically to the points of those who are votaries of such a view. All I would argue is, put against such a view is, in nature, all process in the cosmos, everything is cyclical. There is no linear process in the cosmos. Nowhere is that. In fact, I usually use in my talks and discussions, when people talk about family business and how to make business the second generation, third generation, fourth generation. So I try to argue. I said, why do you want to make a company immortal? What is so great about that? Why don't you allow a company to die and start another company? What is so great? And I said, in any case, if you look, whether it's a Fortune 500 list or the Fortune 100 list or the top 100 companies in India list, every 20 years it's completely changing. So it's only proving one thing, which is that no part of human life can be exempt from this iron law of nature. The things are born, they mature, they ripen, they die. Everything. And planets and stars and galaxies, it happens. How on earth do we think that one living organism somewhere can beat this law? So at best, I'm saying you can lengthen it. And see, if you look at the time scale, the 100 years, a guy from say, in 100 years, he lives 200 years. And even if you take the lifespan of the human experience, modern human experience, as you rightly said, it's about less than 6,000 years old. Since the agricultural revolution till now, it's 6,000 years. And this is a blink of an eye in the history of this planet itself. So I think we are talking, for us, it is very meaningful. Just like a Drosophila fly. Drosophila fly apparently has a lifespan of 1 day or something, or a few hours. But in that hour, it lives a whole lifespan. And that's why it was of great value to the original geneticists before they could crack the genetic code and all that. When they were trying to understand what happens in successive generations, they were able to say over a 1-month experiment, see the path of 30 generations in that 1 month, because it was a Drosophila fly. We are like that, but to somebody who is observing this planet or this Milky Way galaxy or solar system. So I think this is, of course, like somebody said, this is very important for us because 100 years becoming 200 years, yeah, obviously it is tremendously significant for us. But even from a planetary perspective, it looks like it's going to be a very trivial kind of event.
No, but honestly, for me, the most exciting part of it is that the complexities of aging, right? With old people at home and the struggle and the suffering. I think even half of this is achieved. I think the life is going to be a lot better.
I'm not sure Nandu, because of just one fact. Like if you look into demography, and I mean, you just start seeing what happens to how do populations. Every prediction given by people who understand statistics, etc., over the last 50 years has gone wrong because they have never been able to forecast how demography is going to work. So demography is a complex mix of fertility rate, death rate, life expectancy, our despoiling of the environment and the impact which it has on our lives, and so many things. So in other words, it's a very complex phenomenon. So it has defied say very accurate mathematical analysis only because we really cannot say how things are going to go.
No, but I think maybe somewhere our very understanding, if it is also very little, because if you remember what we studied earlier or what was talked about Chernobyl, was that the place is lost for 1,000 years. In fact, the Chernobyl documentary series, if you have watched, even there they talk about it that this is lost for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
See, I've always been curious about that. In 2016, one of these channels, Discovery or National Geography, they wanted to do a 30th anniversary of Chernobyl.
Yeah.
So they sent a team, but the documentary came out sometime in late 2018 because I think they had a lot of challenges getting permission to go and shoot and all that. And when they went there, that whole epicenter of radiation had shrunk from the previous understanding. And in fact, from the point where they started going, they saw thriving vegetation there. They even found 2 or 3 animals which were believed to be extinct in Europe for almost 100 years.
No, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So that's what, in fact, till then, I don't know if you remember, I used to be a very staunch environmentalist. At least I used to be almost near bordering on activism. And after this, I thought that our understanding of Earth is so poor.
Yeah. I agree with you about that. I agree with you.
So Earth had a way of recouping. So maybe, so I'm only trying to be in these conversations, like with your conversations for, I think, in all this, I think the biggest privilege I have is to learn through these conversations. And of course, some of these things are little blocking because, we grow up with a thought that we always die. And this was like very different from that. But I'm just trying to be open to the possibility. So that's where I just wanted to ask you or pick your brain on that.
Yeah.
But Bala, thank you so much for giving your time, and all the listeners and audience. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did in bringing this conversation. And please do follow him. Even today, there's an amazing piece that he published on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is the best place to follow him. His thoughts, opinions keep coming out there, and also the books. And the links for these books are also below this podcast. So do go look them up and read them, and you will then start following him as well. And I think there are 2 more books on the way. So that will also come up soon. And hopefully we'll bring him back in to talk to us about them as well. And enjoy the ride. Bala, once again, thank you so much for being part of Future Fast.
Thank you, Nanju. It was a pleasure.